My name is Genevieve Morgan. I'm 34 years old. And this is the story of how I survived betrayal so twisted, it nearly cost me everything, including the life of my unborn child. It was the kind of winter Boston hadn't seen in years. The kind that sinks into your bones and makes the windows sweat with cold. I was 6 months pregnant, sitting by our front window, gently rubbing my belly as flakes of snow drifted down in slow, hypnotic spirals. The house was quiet. Too quiet. That silence wasn't peace. It was absence. My husband, Tyler Morgan, was nowhere to be found, again. Another missed checkup. Another excuse. Another night where the candles I lit at dinner flickered alone until they burned themselves out. Tyler had always been the calm one. A brilliant biotech engineer, tall, sharp-jawed, eyes that could convince you to trust even when your instincts begged otherwise. We met at an alumni event years ago. He remembered me from a college lab I barely recalled. But somehow, by the end of that night, I was hooked. We were like gravity and sky, different, but bound by something unseen. Our courtship was full of little perfect moments, train rides between cities, rainy day kisses, shared glances that made everything else blur. When he proposed beneath the blooming cherry trees at Boston Common, I said yes before he could even finish the question. We bought a red brick house with ivy creeping up one side and chose the softest shade of blue for the nursery, painting clouds on the ceiling with glow-in-the-dark stars. I was a financial analyst by day, a dreamer by night. But my biggest dream wasn't a title or a salary, it was this. Motherhood. The problem was, motherhood didn't come easy. For years we tried. Doctor visits, disappointments, late-night tears, all of it felt like the world telling me no, over and over. But just when I thought I'd never hear yes, it came. I was pregnant. Naturally. A miracle. I remember the look on Tyler's face when I told him, joy, shock, relief all mixed into one. He hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. That was the man I married. But something changed. At first, it was small things, work ran late, phone calls got shorter, his eyes didn't light up when we talked about the baby anymore. He stopped attending the doctor visits. Meetings, he said. Deadlines. I tried to believe him. I wanted to believe him. But then I found the receipt. It was folded in his coat pocket. Maison Bel Air. A French restaurant we used to go to when we were in love. The date matched the night he said he had to work late. $276 for 2 people. I stared at the paper like it might explain itself. It didn't. The next day, I found the text. Thank you for last night's dinner. I can still see the look in your eyes. My heart cracked. I didn't say anything, not yet. Instead, I watched. I noticed. I listened. And what I saw sent shivers down my spine. He was distant, distracted. And every morning, he brought me the same cup of coffee. Decaf, he said. For the baby. Except, after each cup, I felt worse. Dizzy. Nauseated. Like I was losing control of my own body. My weight dropped. My energy collapsed. Something felt wrong, not just emotionally, but physically. Then came the day I couldn't get out of bed without the walls spinning. That's when I made the decision that would save my life, and my baby's. I went to the clinic alone. Dr. Riley, my OBGYN, frowned the moment she saw me. My color was off. My weight was too low. She ordered an emergency ultrasound and blood work. As I lay in the dim room, watching my baby's tiny form on the screen, I felt a jolt of pure fear when Dr. Riley's face changed. The heartbeat was weak. The placenta showed signs of abnormality. Then the blood test came back. A medication, misoprostol, used medically to terminate pregnancies. A small amount had been found in my system. My hands trembled. No, I whispered. No, I've never touched anything. I'm careful. I swear. Dr. Riley took my hand gently. It didn't get there on its own. Everything spun. The coffee. The dizziness. The missed appointments. The text message. Oh my God. Tyler. The man I had built my life around. The man I had trusted with everything. The hospital contacted the authorities. I called my best friend Emily, a fierce attorney who didn't just know the law, she knew how to protect people. You're not going home tonight, she said. You and that baby are staying with me. I packed nothing. I just left. Because deep down, I knew Tyler wasn't just lying. He wasn't just cheating. He was trying to erase the very thing I had prayed for all my life. Me. And our child. I sat by Emily's window that night, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea, staring out at the streetlights. I was cold, but it wasn't the winter. It was the truth sinking in. He wanted us gone. But I wasn't going anywhere. Not quietly. Not broken. Because this was no longer just a heartbreak. It was war. And I was going to win it. I didn't sleep that night at Emily's. I just lay there on the edge of her guest bed, a blanket draped over me, one hand resting protectively on my belly. Every few minutes, I whispered to my baby, telling them everything would be okay. That I would protect them. That no matter what happened, we would survive this. But inside, I was unraveling. The next morning, the police arrived. Inspector Miller, a tall man with a calm demeanor and tired eyes, sat across from me in Emily's living room. He asked about the coffee. About the symptoms. About the messages. About Tyler. He didn't say much at first. Just took notes, nodded, and asked gentle follow-up questions. Then he stood up and said, "We're going to test every sample we can get from your home. Coffee grounds. The machine. Any cups left behind. Don't contact your husband. Let us do that." Emily's face was stone-cold serious as she watched him leave. "This is bigger than we thought, Jen." "I know," I whispered. But knowing didn't make it hurt any less. Later that day, I received a message from Tyler. "Where are you? I'm worried. Come home. I just want to talk." I didn't answer. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to cry. I wanted to break everything in the house. But more than anything, I wanted to make sure he never got close to me or my child again. Emily and I forwarded the message to the police. That night, while I sat on the couch staring into nothingness, Emily sat beside me with her laptop open. She started filing paperwork for a restraining order. Then she looked up and said quietly, "You know, we could also file for an emergency injunction." "What kind?" I asked numbly. "One that freezes your shared accounts, stops him from making any decisions about the property, and gives you sole control of the house until this investigation ends." I blinked slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Do it." The next 2 days blurred together. The police conducted a full search of our home. The coffee Tyler had left behind tested positive for the same substance found in my blood. They seized his computer and found research files, documents, even private notes that suggested he'd been testing compounds for pregnancy disruption, all outside the scope of his official work. That was enough for an arrest warrant. They picked him up from his office at the lab. Emily told me before the news broke. "They've taken him in. He's denying everything. Says it must be a mistake." But the lab was already distancing themselves. A press release hit the local news within hours. Biotech engineer under investigation for misuse of substances and domestic endangerment. And then came the public backlash. Neighbors. Colleagues. Friends. Everyone who had once called us the perfect couple started messaging me with disbelief and outrage. But I ignored it all. Because all I cared about now was my daughter. Yes, daughter. During one of the follow-up ultrasounds, I found out I was having a baby girl. The technician tried to sound cheerful, but there was a tension in the room none of us could ignore. The heartbeat was still weak. She was still fighting. And so was I. Dr. Riley became my lifeline. She checked on me every few days. Monitored every movement. Every flutter. I changed my diet. Took every supplement she recommended. We did everything we could to keep my baby safe. And through it all, Tyler stayed in custody. Eventually, he confessed. He had been having an affair with one of his coworkers. Rachel. She was 5 months pregnant. Their baby. That was the one he wanted. That was the one he planned for. I was a mistake. An inconvenience. A liability. And so he did the unthinkable. He told the police he had been trying to gently phase out the pregnancy. He thought if I lost the baby naturally, no one would question it. He said he didn't mean to hurt me, just wanted things to go back to normal. Normal? I stared at the police report in Emily's hands, my heart pounding. My vision blurred. My throat burned with every breath I took. He didn't just betray me. He tried to erase me. But I wasn't gone. And I wasn't done. The trial was scheduled for the spring. Emily said it might take months to gather the full case, but the charges were serious: attempted poisoning, domestic abuse, conspiracy to endanger a child. Tyler's career? Ruined. His reputation? Gone. His new relationship? I didn't care. Because all I wanted was to hold my baby girl in my arms and show her that monsters don't win. That no matter how dark the road gets, there's always a way through it. The first time I felt her kick, I broke down in tears. In Emily's kitchen. Over a bowl of cereal. She was still fighting. So I would, too. For her. For me. For every woman who's ever been betrayed by the person she trusted most. The spring thaw came late that year in Boston. Dirty snow still lined the sidewalks when Tyler's trial began. I remember standing in front of the courthouse in a long gray coat, one hand over my swollen belly, the other gripping Emily's arm like a lifeline. The air was heavy with silence, the kind that settles over a graveyard just before the first shovel hits the earth. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than the wind outside. I was seated across from the man I once promised to love for the rest of my life. But the man sitting across from me wasn't Tyler anymore. Not really. The person I saw now had sunken eyes, disheveled hair, and a hollow stare that no longer matched the charming engineer I used to believe in. The prosecution presented the evidence with surgical precision. The tainted coffee samples from our kitchen. The forensic reports matching the drug found in my bloodstream. The deleted research notes recovered from Tyler's personal drive. The text messages. The receipts. The timeline of missed checkups. Every detail unraveled, one thread at a time. Emily whispered to me during the proceedings, "Let them watch him unravel. Let the truth do the talking." Tyler's lawyer, a smug man in a tailored suit, argued that Tyler had been under immense professional stress. That perhaps he'd made questionable decisions, but it wasn't with malicious intent. That I had probably misinterpreted the situation. Misinterpreted? I nearly stood up in rage. But I didn't. I held my breath. I placed a steadying hand over my daughter's kicking foot inside my womb, and I stayed quiet. Because I didn't need to scream to be heard. They had the evidence. On the third day of the trial, I took the stand. The room fell silent as I walked slowly, carefully, to the front. I stood under the fluorescent lights with my belly leading the way, and I swore to tell the truth. And I did. I told the court about the joy I felt the day I found out I was pregnant. How Tyler embraced me, how we picked out baby names. I spoke about the morning coffee, the dizziness, the terrifying ultrasounds. I described the moment Dr. Riley told me about the drug in my system, and how the world shattered. But when I looked at Tyler, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I simply said, he could have left. He could have walked away. But instead, he tried to kill our child in silence. And I will never forgive that. Tyler looked down. He wouldn't meet my eyes. When the trial ended, the judge delivered a sentence that hit like a gavel to the heart: 15 years in state prison for attempted poisoning and endangerment of a minor, with additional penalties for reckless endangerment and professional misconduct. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as Tyler was led away in handcuffs. I just sat there, numb. The justice felt cold. Sterile. Not triumphant. It would never undo what he tried to do. But it was something. A start. After the trial, I stepped outside to flashing cameras and a sea of reporters. I wasn't famous. But betrayal like this had a way of becoming headlines. A woman from a local station asked, "Ms. Morgan, how do you feel knowing your husband tried to harm your baby?" I paused. Then said, "I feel stronger than I ever have. Because now I know who he is. And now I know exactly who I am, too." That night, Emily and I lit a candle in the apartment and sat in silence. No words were needed. The glow flickered gently, and in its warmth, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not from fear. Not from heartbreak. But from release. A week later, I went into early labor. The hospital lights were bright. The nurses moved quickly. The machines beeped louder than I could bear. And through it all, I gripped the hand of a nurse who whispered encouragement into my ear like a prayer. It was a long, exhausting labor. And then, just before dawn, I heard it. A cry. Small. Shaky. But real. My daughter was born. They placed her on my chest, tiny and warm, her heart fluttering like a hummingbird. She had my nose, my chin, and the dark, thick hair of the man I once loved. I didn't flinch. I didn't recoil. Because none of that mattered. She was mine. I named her Emma. Emma Morgan. She came into the world a fighter, and I promised her then and there, she would never be alone again. The doctors warned me she might face some developmental challenges. She was born small, and her vitals would need monitoring for months. But they also said one thing I held on to like scripture. She's strong, Genevieve. You gave her a chance to live. And in that moment, holding my miracle child under sterile lights in a cold hospital room, I realized, I didn't just survive what Tyler did. I overcame it. With Emma, I had something he could never take. A future. I brought Emma home on a bright, windy afternoon in late spring. Well, not home. Not the red brick house Tyler and I once painted together, not the nursery with clouds on the ceiling and glow-in-the-dark stars he'd stuck up with a step-stool and a smile. That house was no longer ours. It was a crime scene wrapped in memories I didn't want to keep. Instead, I brought Emma to Emily's apartment. A one-bedroom sanctuary tucked between bookstores and bakeries in the South End. It smelled like fresh coffee and sandalwood, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I breathed easy. Emma was so small. Fragile like a porcelain doll, with fingers that curled tightly around mine as if she knew the world outside had already tried to break her. I couldn't stop watching her breathe. Each rise and fall of her chest was a small miracle. The first few weeks were hard. Harder than I expected. Emma had trouble sleeping. She cried for hours some nights, her tiny voice hoarse and raw. She ran a low-grade fever almost every evening, and I lived in fear that I'd wake up to stillness. That after everything we had fought through, fate would still try to take her. I barely slept. I barely ate. But I refused to complain. Because this exhaustion, this fear, this mess of spit-up and rocking and pacing at 2 a.m., it was mine. All mine. A price I'd gladly pay 1,000 times over for her heartbeat to keep going. Emily was my rock. She'd make me tea, take Emma when my arms gave out, and remind me to shower even when all I wanted to do was curl into the corner of the couch and cry. One night, she said quietly, "You know, you're the strongest person I've ever met." I looked at her with hollow eyes and whispered, "I don't feel strong. I feel broken." And Emily replied, "Then maybe that's what strength really is. Surviving even when everything inside you wants to give up." That night, I watched Emma sleep with her little hand resting against her cheek, and I decided something: I couldn't live in hiding. Not forever. Not like this. I needed to rebuild. Not just for me, but for her. When Emma was 4 months old, I made the first bold decision since the trial. I sold the house. Every part of me trembled when I signed the final papers, but I knew it was right. The real estate market was still strong, and despite the shadow cast over the property, it sold quickly. Emily handled the logistics, making sure Tyler had no claim to the money. He was still locked away, serving time, and the law was on my side now. I took the proceeds, opened a new account in only my name, and made a second decision. We were leaving Boston. That city held too many ghosts. Too many stares. Too many whispers in the grocery aisle and cautious smiles from neighbors who didn't know what to say. I didn't want Emma's first steps to echo through halls built on betrayal. So we moved to San Diego. I chose it for the warmth. The ocean breeze. The clean slate. We rented a small 2-bedroom cottage on the edge of a quiet neighborhood filled with palm trees and the smell of jasmine in the air. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't grand. But it was ours. And most importantly, it had no memories. Emma loved it. She laughed more in the first month there than she had in her entire short life. Her fever bouts lessened. Her first smile came one morning while I was playing soft piano music in the background. And when she giggled at the sound of wind chimes, I cried harder than I had in months. We built a routine. I'd wake up, feed her, rock her by the big window that faced the rising sun, then take long stroller walks through the neighborhood. I started doing remote consulting work in finance, something manageable that let me stay home with her. It wasn't flashy, but it gave us security. One morning, I attended a support group for parents of special needs children. I wasn't sure if Emma would face long-term challenges yet, but I wanted to be ready. I needed to understand what might come. That's where I met Robert. He was in his early 40s. Kind eyes. Wore glasses he kept pushing up absent-mindedly. He brought his twin boys, Max and Leo, both of whom had developmental delays from a premature birth. Robert didn't talk much at first. He listened. But when I shared my story, he stayed behind after the meeting, his voice quiet but steady. "I don't know how you're still standing," he said. "That takes a kind of strength most people never find." I smiled faintly. "I didn't have a choice." He nodded. "None of us do, really. We just keep moving. Because they need us to." That day, we sat on a park bench together while Emma napped in her stroller and his boys played with fallen leaves. It felt easy. Peaceful. Like maybe I didn't have to be alone forever. We didn't rush anything. There were no grand gestures. No declarations. Just shared conversations, playground visits, and the occasional cup of coffee that didn't make me nauseous or suspicious. And slowly, painfully, cautiously, I began to trust again. Not in a man. But in life. In the idea that after everything, something good could still grow. Emma turned 1 on a Sunday morning filled with sunlight and salt-kissed wind from the Pacific. We held a small party in the backyard of our little San Diego home, nothing extravagant, just a few new friends from the support group, a cake shaped like a sunflower, and a string of paper hearts Emma kept trying to chew on. She didn't walk yet. Her balance was still wobbly, her legs unsure. The doctors said it might take longer for her, that what she'd gone through in the womb would leave traces. But when she clapped her hands and let out a string of babbles that only I could understand, it didn't matter. To me, she was perfect. Whole. A miracle with dimpled cheeks and eyes that sparkled when the wind blew just right. Robert came with his boys. They brought a little wooden toy Emma wouldn't let go of for days afterward. He wore a plain blue shirt and a nervous smile, like he wasn't sure if he belonged there, but he did. More than most ever had. After everyone left, and the yard was littered with crumpled napkins and fallen balloons, Robert lingered behind to help clean up. We stood at the edge of the porch, watching Emma nap through the baby monitor's fuzzy screen. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the quiet street. "She's something special," Robert said softly. "She is," I replied. "She saved me." He turned to me then, not with pity, but something gentler. "You saved her, too." I wanted to believe that. That what I had done mattered. That the fear I walked through had built something unbreakable. That motherhood, even the broken, bruised version I stumbled through, was still worthy of celebration. I didn't kiss Robert that night. But I thought about it. A few weeks later, I started something unexpected. At first, it was just a blog, a digital journal for moms who had endured trauma during pregnancy or motherhood. I called it Heartbeat Undone. A place where I poured every unspoken word, every nightmare, every small triumph. I shared Emma's story. My story. And I didn't sugarcoat any of it. The grief. The anger. The paranoia. The guilt of loving a child who looked like the man who nearly destroyed both of us. It was raw. It was ugly. It was honest. And people listened. Emails flooded in from women around the country. Some whispered secrets they'd never told a soul. Some just said thank you. And suddenly, I realized I wasn't just healing, I was helping others heal, too. Emily called one day from Boston. "Your story's been picked up by a parenting podcast. They want to interview you." I hesitated. "You think I should do it?" "I think your voice deserves to be heard." So I spoke. And it was terrifying. But it was also the most freeing thing I'd done since the trial. Soon after, a local women's health nonprofit reached out. They were launching a campaign around maternal abuse and wanted to collaborate. They'd read my story. They wanted me to be part of it, not just as a survivor, but as a voice for women whose pain had been silenced. The meetings were nerve-wracking at first. I wasn't used to boardrooms or advocacy circles. I was used to spreadsheets and silence. But with each meeting, each mom I met, each brave story shared, I found myself again, not as the woman Tyler left behind, but as the woman who built something out of nothing. The nonprofit offered me a consulting role. I accepted. It allowed me to work from home, spend time with Emma, and speak on behalf of people who had lived through what I had. And somewhere along the way, I realized something even more terrifying than betrayal. I was happy. Not always. Not perfectly. But deeply. Quietly. One evening, after a long day of virtual meetings and diaper changes, I sat on the floor with Emma as she stacked soft blocks. She looked up at me, grinned with her two tiny teeth, and said it for the first time. "Mama." Just one word. But it broke me open. I scooped her into my arms and sobbed, deep, shuddering cries that felt like they came from a decade ago. Because no matter what Tyler had tried to erase, here she was. Alive. Laughing. Calling for me. And for the first time, I believed it fully, I had done something good. Something right. Something no one, not even the man I once loved, could take away. It was a quiet Thursday morning when I received the envelope. No return address. Just my name, Genevieve Morgan, written in thin, slanted handwriting across the front. It had been nearly 2 years since the trial. Nearly 2 years since I'd seen Tyler's face in person, watched him hang his head as the judge sentenced him to 15 years behind bars. I should have thrown it away. I should have burned it. But curiosity has its own cruel gravity. I waited until Emma was down for her nap, the baby monitor hissing softly in the corner of the room. Then I sat on the couch, opened the envelope, and unfolded the letter inside. It was from him. Tyler. The handwriting hadn't changed, sharp, efficient, calculated. Every loop perfectly closed. Every word tightly pressed. Genevieve. There isn't a day I don't think about what I did. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to read this. But I heard about Emma. That she survived. That she's okay. And I needed to say, thank you. For protecting her when I couldn't even protect myself from what I'd become. I'm not the man I was, and I don't deserve to ever see you again. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Tyler. I stared at the letter for a long time. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From rage. Because how dare he? How dare he write as if he were the victim of some uncontrollable storm, as if his betrayal was a symptom, not a choice. I tore the letter in half. Then in quarters. Then in eighths. I threw the pieces into the trash and walked out onto the porch, barefoot, shaking. The ocean breeze hit my face like a slap, and I welcomed it. That night, I watched Emma sleep for longer than usual. I studied the way her chest rose and fell, the way her eyelashes fluttered in dreams. I traced the curve of her cheek with my eyes and whispered to the still air, "You don't owe anyone anything, sweetheart. Not your name. Not your forgiveness." Because I had learned something in the years since she was born, something no apology could ever erase. There are men who will try to rewrite your story to make themselves feel better. But you don't have to hand them the pen. The next morning, I spoke with Emily. I told her about the letter. Her eyes darkened. "He's fishing," she said flatly. "Testing the waters to see if you'll respond. Don't. Even silence is a kind of power." So I stayed silent. Instead, I poured my energy into Heartbeat Undone. What began as a blog had now grown into a movement. We hosted online workshops, partnered with legal aid groups, and even started a small grant fund for mothers escaping abusive relationships. The community had outgrown me, in the best way possible. And then, something I never expected happened. A woman named Rachel reached out. Yes. That Rachel. Tyler's former colleague. The woman he'd gotten pregnant while trying to destroy the child I carried. Her message was brief. "Hi Genevieve. I don't expect you to answer. But I wanted you to know I left him, long before the trial. I had no idea what he was doing to you. I found out after the news broke. And I've lived with that guilt every day since. Our son is 2 now. I named him James. I'm trying to raise him to be nothing like the man who created him. And I just wanted you to know. I believe you saved more than just your daughter. You saved us, too." Rachel. I didn't know what to feel. It would have been easy to hate her. To hold her responsible for being the reason Tyler drifted from me. But I had come to understand something deeper. Tyler would have betrayed me no matter who was waiting on the other side. It wasn't about her. It was about him. I didn't respond. But I didn't delete her message either. Because maybe, just maybe, some stories don't end with revenge. Some end with understanding. Emma was almost 3 now. Her words were still slow to form, her coordination still wobbly, but her spirit? Unstoppable. She was the kind of child who made people smile in grocery stores, who picked dandelions with both hands like they were treasure. She loved soft blankets, cartoon penguins, and sitting by the sea as the waves crashed against the rocks. One day, while we were walking the beach trail together, Emma stopped, tugged my sleeve, and pointed at a tall man with 2 kids up ahead. "Daddy?" she asked, her voice curious. I froze. She didn't remember him. Couldn't. She had no memories of Tyler. None. That word, it was something she'd picked up from a book or a TV show. It wasn't real to her. But it was a knife to me. I knelt in the sand beside her, swallowed the lump in my throat, and said softly, "No, sweetheart. Not him." She nodded, satisfied, and skipped ahead, humming. I watched her for a long time, this tiny soul I had fought so hard for, and realized something I hadn't admitted before. I was still healing. Even after all this time. Even after the trial, the therapy, the advocacy work. Some wounds don't close completely. They just become part of who you are. But that's okay. Because Emma didn't need me to be perfect. She just needed me to keep going. And I would. For her. Always. When Emma turned 5, we planted a garden together. It wasn't big, just a small patch of land behind our house, tucked between the porch and the fence. We chose wildflowers, soft purple lavenders, yellow daisies, and sweet peas that wrapped themselves around a trellis like little dancers reaching for the sun. Emma wore a floppy hat and gardening gloves 2 sizes too big. She called the watering can Mr. Splash. It was the first time she had ever planted anything. As we worked side by side, her tiny fingers pushing seeds into the soil, I realized something strange and beautiful. This wasn't about flowers. It was about rooting ourselves. About taking back the earth under our feet. About finally saying, "This is our life now." That summer, Heartbeat Undone reached over 1 million visitors. I'd been invited to speak at conferences, share my story in panels, and consult on hospital policies for identifying subtle signs of maternal abuse. I'd become a voice, not the only one, but one of many, helping to carve space for women to be believed. The irony never escaped me. The woman who once whispered "I'm fine" through tears in the shower had now built a platform that echoed around the country. But it didn't make me forget what it cost to get here. Tyler's name came up again briefly in a news article about biotech regulation reform. He had filed an early release petition, citing good behavior and overcrowding. It was denied. The system, for once, did not forget. I didn't follow the details. I didn't want to know if Rachel ever took James to see him. I didn't want to know if he missed being a father. Because being a father isn't a title. It's a choice. And the moment Tyler tried to erase Emma, he forfeited that choice. One warm Sunday morning, Emma and I walked the cliffside path along the ocean. She was holding a small notebook in her hand, one she'd scribbled in with crayons and stickers, calling it her story. When we sat on a bench overlooking the crashing waves, she asked if I wanted to hear it. "Once upon a time," she began, "there was a mommy and a baby who were very, very brave. And the mommy made the baby strong by loving her very, very hard. And then they lived in a yellow house near the ocean and ate toast forever." I laughed so hard I cried. Not because it was funny. But because it was perfect. Later that night, after she went to bed, I stood at the kitchen window and stared out at the moonlight spilling across the garden. The wildflowers swayed in the wind like soft reminders of everything we'd overcome. I thought of the woman I used to be, the one who whispered to her unborn child in the silence of winter, unsure if they'd ever meet. I thought of the girl who drank poisoned coffee from a man she trusted. I thought of the mother in the hospital bed, gripping her baby for the first time, heart thundering in both fear and relief. And I thought of who I was now, not broken, not vengeful, but reborn. My name is Genevieve Morgan. I am 34 years old, and I am not a victim. I am a mother. I am a fighter. I am living proof that even after betrayal this deep, life blooms again, slowly, stubbornly, beautifully. To anyone who has ever felt discarded, silenced, or erased. You are not alone. You are not what they did to you. You are what you do next. And me? I'm going to keep raising my daughter, one miracle day at a time. I'm going to keep speaking for the ones who can't. I'm going to love without fear, live without apology, and plant more wildflowers wherever I go. Because survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of everything. Thank you for joining me on this deeply personal journey. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Have you lived through something similar? Your voice might be the one that helps someone else heal. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more true-to-life stories of resilience, justice, and transformation. Because sometimes, the best revenge is simply surviving beautifully.